This podcast is part of the Pop-Up University series, showcasing collaborations between early career researchers at the University of Sheffield and South Yorkshire creatives.
This project is a collaboration between early career researcher Dr. Sandivel Rosales Cadena, Angela Highton, Library Associate Director, and Aranza Barrutia, National Fairground and Circus Archive Collections Manager. This podcast consists of 2 episodes where we will discuss body image issues in the circus industry. It also includes a video gallery with beautiful images from the National Fairground and Circus Archive collections. Welcome to Circus of Confidence, a body image revolution. Get ready to flip the script on body image, shatter stereotypes, and embrace your unique beauty. Step into the enchanting world of our podcast, where we combine the magic of the circus with the transformative power of self-love and empowerment. Join us as we explore inspiring stories of dazzling performers and uplifting conversations that redefine body image and unlock your inner strength. It's time to embrace your uniqueness and let your confidence soar under the big top of life. Are you ready to embrace your inner circus performer and write your own narrative? Tune in and be part of the most extraordinary journey to empowerment. I am Belle, and I'll be the host for these 2 episodes. My research focuses on body dissatisfaction and the role of self-compassion to improve women's body image. I'm going to start by defining body dissatisfaction. Body dissatisfaction is defined as a negative self-assessment of one's body. For example, the shape or size of the body or parts of the body. Such negative self-assessment has multifactorial roots, such as internalization of the thin ideal for women's bodies that is perpetuated in popular culture around the world. It can be also influenced by social comparison to ideal others as a basis of self-evaluation, and perfectionism in pursuing unrealistic high body standards, among others. Body dissatisfaction is a serious problem because research has linked it to physical health problems, such as restrictive eating, and psychological issues, such as low self-esteem, anxiety, and shame that can negatively affect women's body health and sense of well-being. Research has found that self-compassion plays an important role to help women lower levels of body dissatisfaction. Specifically, self-compassion encompasses 3 components that are interrelated and equally important. The first component is self-kindness, which enables people to treat themselves with care and understanding rather than harsh judgment. The second component is common humanity, which refers to the idea that all human beings experience pain and failure, and that by accepting it, people can have a sense of company when suffering. The third component is mindfulness, which refers to observing negative thoughts and emotions and promoting awareness by being open when painful feelings or emotions arise. Research has found that higher levels of self-compassion are associated with lower levels of body dissatisfaction. In 2018, for the Festival of the Mind, I collaborated with Claire Crook, who I will introduce you next, to put a show based on self-compassion and body dissatisfaction in women. So right now, I am going to introduce you Claire Crook. She is our special guest for this first episode. Her main discipline is aerial, specializing in rope. She also performs silks, static trapeze, aerial hoop, hula hoops, fire, and stilt walkabout. Her own productions include Mirrors and Ribbons, an exploration of female body image against the backdrop of contemporary and historical circus performers. This is the collaboration where we met. So thank you, Claire, for being here today. Would you like to say a little bit more about yourself?
Thanks, Belle. Yes, I describe myself as a circus and theatre performer. And as Belle said, I specialise in aerial disciplines. I've been doing that for quite a long time, 23 years now, and how I work has changed quite a lot over time. I used to work a lot more in straight circus, and these days I like to marry that more with theatre, so putting narratives, emotional, metaphysical, or story narratives, when using my circus skills within those narratives. The collaboration was it was quite a big deal for me, actually, because it was a show in which I talked about some personal stuff, but also the subject matter is a very important one, and it felt really important to put across the right message.
Yeah, actually, this was my second question. Actually, I am interested in finding out how is that you decided to take part in this project, Mirrors and Ribbons, because we know that body image is a sensitive topic, mostly for women. So what made you accept to take part in this show?
It felt like a very challenging but very great opportunity to talk about some of this stuff. And the backdrop of it was that it was the 250th anniversary of Circus in the UK, and so there was a lot of talk about circus, a lot of shows going on, a lot of events going on. And initially, I was talking to the National Fairground and Circus Archive, which is based in Sheffield, and we were discussing. I put forward some ideas for performances. And then I'm not quite sure, Belle, how Anthony met you, but within that process, Belle's name came up, and her research, which is into female body image. That seemed like just a really juicy subject matter to try and talk about through circus, which is obviously a very physical discipline, and your body is very important, and it's very, very visible in circus because it is a physical visual art. So you have all these people looking at your body and what it can do. And that can, I think it brings up a lot of things for the performer and for the audience from both points of view. And people might look upon a circus performer who would be considered very fit and think, well, obviously they're really happy with their body. Look what they can do with it. But I don't think that's necessarily always the case.
When we were working on this project, neither of us knew what would be the result. But the fact that later we had Angela coming in and giving ideas, I think it helped us to talk about not only about body dissatisfaction, but also about body satisfaction, which is in the end what we want to achieve with women struggling with their body. At the beginning, you mentioned that you talked about personal issues you had. Is there something you would like to talk about?
Yeah, sure, I can. And it's something I'm becoming a little bit more comfortable talking about. I feel like when we made Mirrors and Ribbons, some of the stuff I talked about and some of the material we used in the show, it was the first time I'd really admitted that to anybody else, especially in such a clear way. You know, words can be difficult to put around this stuff, but I would say that I have suffered from disordered eating and poor body image since I was a teenager. And there are some things within my circus training and work that have kind of reflected that. So I would, for example, do a ridiculous amount of exercise because I was worried that I might be putting on weight. So I try and burn off those calories or those perceived weight. I now realize that I have never ever seen anything like considered fat, whatever you want to say that. I've never even got near that. I've been had a fairly slim body all of my life, partly because of my physiology, my metabolism, whatever, and also because I do work in a very, very physical way, as do all circus performers. But a large amount of my adult life, I have believed that I am too fat, overweight, don't enjoy how my body appears, and I'm worried about how other people might perceive my body. And although we didn't really deeply go into some of those things in Mirrors and Ribbons, we used some of that material, particularly around obsessive behaviors like weighing myself several times a day and these feelings of dissatisfaction. And part of what we presented was this illusion of a circus performer who was very in control of what happened with her body and how people perceived it, but actually the backstage aspect of that, or the personal side of that, where actually that isn't the case. It was pretty, because of your research and, like you say, Angela, as well. And I feel like the three of us kind of threw lots of things into the pot, and somehow we shaped this show out of that.
Well, thank you for sharing such personal experiences, because I know that it's not easy to talk about our bodies, right? And for those who struggle with body image, with eating disorders or other kind of disorders related to the body, can be very difficult to talk about. Thank you for doing it here with us today. It's interesting, all the things you are telling me today, because it's been 4 or 5 years since we did that, right? So I am interested on how you think body image plays a role within the circus industry.
I think that there is an expectation of, still in all industries, that female bodies look a certain way. And I initially thought that within circus that would be very different, because we work so much with what our bodies can do, and it's less about how they look. But actually, and particularly in the corporate world of performance, but in other aspects of it too, there is a perception that a body should look a certain way. It should be slim, it should be toned, you shouldn't have any excess weight on it. And also that can go even further into kind of facial appearance and how your hair is and stuff like that. And this is very surprising to me as well, because I felt like circus traditionally has been a quite an alternative art form. We've not really been in those kind of worlds, that kind of commercial dances, for example, but I feel like more and more circus has moved into those areas. And I think as women, we suffer from the impressions that are so deeply ingrained in society about how a female body should be, which is actually quite often about the male gaze. And it's often quite often unrealistic as well. And from some of my experiences, I've come to believe that you can only be really strong and really skinny for a short amount of time. It's not sustainable. Your body needs to be properly fueled if you're going to use it in these unusual ways. I think in the circus industry, it is starting to change a little bit. And I think a lot of things have happened. I feel like there's been a lot of kickback against particularly the male gaze and against these perceptions in society of how women's bodies should be, kind of since the Me Too, since COVID. A lot of things have changed, and seeing a lot more emphasis on strong bodies in circus, which is what we need for circus in all disciplines. You need your body to be strong, you need it to work, you need it to be healthy. And I feel like that is becoming more accepted, maybe more in contemporary circus than the corporate world as yet, but there's definitely a shift. We've got a long way to go, but it's shifting.
Yeah, it's definitely changing. I guess it's also because of all these new laws. In the UK, it's not allowed to just show skinny bodies nowadays. I think it's helping a lot, this kind of laws. When we were doing the show, going back a little bit to the show, one part of the show was about self-compassion. So you were interpreting a woman who felt dissatisfied with their body, but then found a letter about self-compassion, and it speaks about self-compassion. So would you say that self-compassion plays a role when you think about your body, what your body can do, treating yourself kindly?
Yeah, I think it's a really powerful tool, actually, and I think it was really a really powerful moment in the show as well. But I also think from having performed that show, and made that show, that a lot of that stuff about self-compassion, I kind of internalized a lot of it, and it definitely felt like it opened something up for me, that a different way of thinking. It opened me up to a different way of thinking, and I think it is really powerful. And I try to remember, because we all dip in and out of how we feel about things, and some patterns are very hard to break, aren't they? But I do try to remember that, and try to go, actually, I can do pretty amazing things with my body, as can we all, and I should be grateful for that. It works. Yeah, I think it's really powerful, and I think it's one of those things, isn't it, that you need to find your way into that. You can't just say, well, just be kind to yourself and everything's fine. It's finding a way of really internalizing that belief. That's what sets things free.
Yes, definitely. It's not something that you just read and suddenly you have the skill, right? I always think of these psychological tools as seeds we put in our brains, and then we have to water them so one day they flourish. Otherwise, the seed dies, right? We are coming to the end of our podcast, but before we finish, I'd like to ask you one last question, and this is about what would be your message for another performers who are struggling with body image.
And that's a really nice metaphor, by the way, about the seed. I really like that. This is something I've been thinking about quite a lot recently, and I've been trying. I haven't really managed it yet, just to write something about my own experiences through, being a circus performer for a long time. So I have, as I've kind of mentioned a bit before, a history of basically overtraining and under eating for a very long time, and that has compromised my circus career and my abilities and my strength. And there's been times when I've really suffered, like I've kind of been ill, or I've not felt strong enough to perform certain things, and I've not progressed. And that is what happens. It's like, our bodies are actually amazingly resilient. You can get away with overtraining and under eating for a short time, but at some point you're going to pay the price for that. And I definitely feel like I have paid the price for that. It's getting better because there's a lot more research, and it's reaching like circus communities and climbing communities about nutrition and training and all those things. I think my message really is, it doesn't actually matter what your body looks like. It's about how healthy it is. It's about if it can sustain the activities you want to do. It's about if you're trying to get stronger, is it getting stronger? It's about if you're trying to get more flexible, is it getting more flexible? And if it's not, then you're probably not resting enough, and you're probably not eating enough. If you're asking your bodies to outrageous and amazing things, you've got to fuel it properly. You've got to look after it. Otherwise, it's just not possible. And I would say, if you want to have a long, successful career in circus, look at what you're eating and how much training you're doing, and try to make sure those things match up. And that is more important than being a certain size or shape. Circus is one of those places where women can have like strong, muscular bodies, and that is becoming more and more acceptable. And that's great. I think that's really, really important. And we also need to have those role models for the younger generation. That's so, so important, because if you think a woman can only be one way, then, you're going to struggle, basically.
Yeah, so I think being open-minded about other body shapes.
Yes.
So as we wrap up this episode, I'd like to thank Claire for sharing her incredible story with us, very personal experiences. We know it's not easy to talk about these issues, but sometimes we need to talk about them so other people know they are not the only ones struggling.
Thanks, Belle.
Thank you all for listening. In episode 2, we explore issues of body image and empowerment in the world of circus performance.
If this podcast raises any concerns about your body image and/or your mental health, you're encouraged to book an appointment to see a GP. Find out more about Pop-Up University on the University of Sheffield player.